What's up, data transformers? This is Bolaji, and welcome to Data Career Transformations, the show where we watch analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists transform their careers. Today, we are talking to an engineering leader who helps chief data analytics officers, data and AI leaders maximize their data investments. I
Nice.
mean, he has hands-on expertise at all stages of the data product lifecycle. He builds bespoke data platforms for analytics, ML ops, Gen AI platforms. But here's what you don't know about him. He just ran the half marathon in Berlin yesterday. Are you
What?
kidding me? He actually got married at the French embassy in Berlin. My goodness. This is like international super agent stuff. He
Oh,
once got a book deal from a
behave.
publisher for whom he fixed
Yeah.
a vulnerability in their online shop. And he was born on a volcano. Wait,
What?
please help me welcome, calling in from Berlin, Germany, Louis Guitton. What's up, Louis?
Hey, what's up, guys? It's good to be here with you.
Man, we've been working hard to get this one lined up. Finally, the calendars worked out, and here we are. Congratulations on the Berlin Half Marathon. That's always been on my bucket list. Was this your first one, Louis?
No. It was my third one and second time at the Berlin Half.
Woo!
It's always a blast. It's one of the biggest in Europe. More than
Yes.
35,000 people are running
Oh
it.
my
And
gosh.
it's so successful that actually next year the entry is going to be a raffle. And so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to run it again. So it was a special
Wow.
one.
That's wild. That's wild. 35,000 people. I'm very interested, Louis, in what preparation looks like for a marathon, both the physical preparation, but also the mental preparation. What does that process look like for you?
I'm running only half marathons, but like half to prepare it and injury free, you might spend
Mm,
maybe 3 months, run 3, 4 times a week.
okay.
And so that's going to take care of the physical preparation. And mentally, I think you just need to be fresh enough, I think, to run it and just have fun. Because if you come a bit wore down from work or from personal life, whatever, and then you try to on top like really push it, I think it's going to be tough to really make your goals. But like if you're fresh enough to go for it and have fun doing it, then yeah, UPB, and then you have a lot of fun. And yesterday was sunny, it was beautiful. There were a lot of people cheering, so the atmosphere
Wow.
was perfect for that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Louis, it seems like you've always been adjacent or close to the sports world, both professionally and personally. Talk to us about that a little bit. Why has sports always been such a big part of your life?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the sports has always been an interesting thing to kind of balance out all the sitting that I'm doing in front of my laptop. I love, I love data, I love computers, but I also love to be outside and play team sports. So I played football for a little bit in uni and afterwards with colleagues and stuff. And now I'm sort of transitioning to more of a solo sport like running, but I do enjoy yeah, I do enjoy football from time to time with friends. And yeah, like professionally, it just happened a little bit by chance. But of course, like sports analytics is a big topic as
Yes.
well as sports media. So I worked
Mm,
for a sports media company for a while. And nowadays I just, look at my running data. And I wrote recently a blog post on the running data of endurance training. And so you can
yes.
sort of analyze your data coming from your smartwatch and, look at all kinds of things. It's really geeky, but really fun as well.
It's funny because as data becomes more prevalent, of course, professional athletes have been tracking their data for years. Now, a lot of us have these smartwatches where we can track our sleep, track our steps, track our running. How do you think data is maybe changing the culture of maybe us non-athletes or weekend athletes?
Right. And just to second your thought and mention something else, like yesterday at the half marathon, like one of my best friends was running
Yes,
it with me, and he's also working in
lovely.
data, and he had a completely different approach to the data of running. So he's running it with an analog watch, and he's not getting any
What?
tracking. And his thing is like, well, I'm already working with data from night like night to day, and I don't want to look at data again when I'm running for
Wow.
fun. I'm sort
Yes.
of the opposite. I'm thinking that, as long as you don't look at data in a way that's sort of hard on you or like pushed on you
Mm,
or like sort of
mm,
monitoring and like this very kind of dry way of looking at data. If you're looking at
mm.
it for improving or for understanding, I think nowadays with those smartwatches, you unlock like so much information, like more than data, right?
Yes.
So like not just running, but also sleep, right? Like so many of us have sleep trackers now.
Hmm.
Some of the watches also have indicators like stress indicators. So, you 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 go into a tough meeting with a client, or you debug a production bug, and suddenly you see a spike in your stress level. And another one that I love on Garmin, and this is not an advert for them, but it's like you have something called the body battery, which is an indicator that they build on top of other metrics that they combine, and it's essentially a percentage that sort of depletes from like that starts high in the morning when you wake up, and then
Yes.
it depletes along the day, during the day, and
Yes.
it can sort of give you an indication of how good you're feeling or not. And of course, you can compare that to your own sensations and sort of triangulate and see, yeah, maybe I should sort of rest a little bit tonight, or maybe I should go
Mm,
for an early one, or like whatever. So
mm.
I really, I approach the data of running and of like in general of those smartwatches this way, more as a sort of as an augmentation of my own experience rather than just like, oh, here's my watch telling me to run twice faster, or something.
That's interesting. That is really interesting. And I love that you've told a couple of stories just now about putting the analog approach next to the digital approach, but both are actually data. Before we had smartwatches, we had an internal clock or an internal sense of when our body battery is low, if I can use that term, when we're starting to feel unproductive, when we're starting to feel like I need to make a change. But sometimes a lot of us have settled into a workaholic sort of habit. We ignore that analog, we ignore that internal alarm. And maybe it's actually useful for us to have something external on our wrist to buzz and say, your body battery is actually low.
Yeah, that's totally right. Right. And things like, you should stand up and like take a break and like, like things like that. It's easy to forget, unfortunately, sometimes. So yeah, definitely. But like with everything data and AI and in general, my approach is more like towards augmentation of the human rather than sort of coercion or replacement or
Mm,
anything like that, right? So
mm. Mm. This is interesting. This is interesting. I think that's going to be a conversation for another day because we can have a full conversation on that. But I'd love for us, Louis, to delve a little bit into your career. For the past several years, Louis, you've been doing some really exciting projects as a freelancer, as a consultant, and I'm excited to get some of your perspective because you've worked in so many different environments. But before we get there, why don't we illustrate for people some of the jobs you've had along the way? So, right now, I guess you are a freelance machine learning engineer and data engineer. Would that be
yeah,
accurate?
yeah, that's correct. So and now I've been freelancing for um about like 1 year and a half full time
Okay.
as a initially as a solution architect, and then I sort of struggle a little bit with that positioning on the market because not necessarily every client really understood that, and so I simplified it, and I'm yeah serving as a machine learning engineer and data engineer, and most often like I get in through the machine learning side, like for example to help with analytics use case or a machine learning use case, and then when you sort
Hmm.
of pull the thread, you realize like you actually need to build a data engineering pipeline and and you need to do
Wow.
the data work.
Interesting. Interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that. But I love how you're kind of shaping and refining your positioning in the marketplace. But prior to that, you had an in-house job as VP of engineering at One Football Labs. So could you tell us a little bit about what One Football Labs does, and then specifically what you were doing as VP of engineering?
Right. So yeah, before jumping full time into freelancing, I was 5 years employed at a company called One Football in Berlin, which
Mm,
is a sports media in football or soccer. And so I started there as a principal machine learning engineer, and like I joined as I joined a data team and I built the machine learning competency there. And the data team was already doing everything else in the analytics stack, and so after 3 years in that sort of data traditional data world, let's say, I was lucky enough to be in a position to then start up a new business unit for that company that went on to be called One Football Labs. And so I co-founded that business unit
wow.
with a friend, another employee of One Football, and then that's where then I became VP of engineering there. We were
Okay.
doing NFTs essentially on foot on football. This was at the time of that hype.
Yes.
And I helped the company secure Series D, and that was very important for the company at the time.
Wow.
Then, yeah, that lasted a couple of years, and I left that job to then start my freelance journey. But that was interesting, you know, experience just because it took me a little bit aside from data, right? So prior to that, I was really like a pure sort of data scientist
Yes.
and in that data world, but uh, in that role, I had to build MVP in like on the web, and then I had to build engineering teams that were engineering teams of full stack web developers and then backend engineers and things like that. And so it took me sort of I stepped out of data for a couple of years, and then now I came back to it, and so it's like gives you an interesting perspective on sometimes, sometimes people in data don't really know what's going on the engineering side. Sometimes people on the engineering side don't really know what's going on in the data side, and some silos can happen. And so having sort of hands-on experience on both sides, I think is something really interesting that I take away from that experience. But yeah, the most interesting challenges and work that I did at OneFootball was part of that first role when I was a machine learning engineer there. I was building natural language microservices for the media business that we had. So I was tagging news in 12 languages. And that was from 2018. So that was long before like the large language models, and we were using deep learning, but we combined that with other approaches like graph approaches, so something called text graphs, so something like pretty deep in the NLP world, and we're using like
Yes.
really cool libraries like Spacey and things like that. And yeah, so OneFootball, really cool company, now does quite a few things. Um, and and yeah, to come back to one of your first questions, like definitely sports related, although also like highly technical.
Technical as well. I have to ask one football question, no pun intended. One football question, soccer for my friends in the US, because I'm also a football or soccer fan. Is Paris Saint-Germain going to win the Champions League this year finally? Yes or no?
Well, if it's 1 year, it's this year. Yeah, I've never seen them play like this.
They look good.
Yeah, they look really good. Can't say it's my favorite team, but like in as far as Champions League goes, I'm gonna root for every French club, and I'm gonna definitely look forward to that. I think they're super strong.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay, we'll get back to data now. Louis, when did you first get obsessed with data? I always find this an interesting question to ask people.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, made me think like I graduated from engineering school in Paris, and in that engineering school, like it's a pretty general engineering degree that you get, and so I was dealing with all kinds of classes, but
Okay.
one class in particular really hooked me, and that was an engineering class on principal component analysis. So PCA, it's an algorithm that allows you to get insights from a data set, and this was the first time that this sort of spark really ignited. And then that was in my sort of year of master, if you will. And then just after that, I went and took a gap year and did some internships. And I had planned to do a first internship in R&D. I wanted to see what like a research and development engineer was like, let alone like I didn't know really what data was or data science or whatever. So I went in Singapore, worked for Bosch as a R&D engineer in the power electronics department. And there I ended up like doing essentially what you would call data science in MATLAB in that department. And I was just like less than 6 months after that class on PCA. And then suddenly I was like applying central limit theorem, which is another cool data science thing, in MATLAB to size battery packs that were hooked to like photovoltaic, plans for houses. And then I was like, wow, like within 6 months with those two experiences, I was like, yeah, I want to work in data. And so I actually changed my plan for the second half of my gap year after that. And then I went like and specialized kind of in that field. And I've been doing data ever since, and data software engineering, because when I started with MATLAB, I was like, okay, then I started like kind of pulling that thread, and I was like, okay, I need to understand better, learn more about Python and about SQL and all these things. And then from one language, programming language to another, I ended up doing data and software engineering.
Oh, this is great. This is great. We should mention, by the way, your internship in Singapore. was initially supposed to be in China, but that didn't work out.
Yeah. So that's a funny story. Yeah, I was gonna go at Bosch in Beijing, because at the time I was studying Chinese as well. So I was like trying to combine all at once and like kind of go
Mm,
do R&D in China. And then that was in 2014 when China actually passed a law to kind of block any non-Chinese engineer to come and sort of
see.
steal the internships from the lot of good Chinese engineers that were trying to look for an internship and for a job. And so, like, I think 2 months before the start of my internship, my boss calls me and says like, "Hey, sorry, we can't host you anymore. You have to find something else." But like, look, he had like Bosch is a big like worldwide group, and so
Mm,
he had colleagues in Singapore that needed an intern, and so I kind of by luck ended up there. Maybe I would not be working in data if if I had been to China. You never know.
interesting. How interesting. And speaking of all the languages that you ended up learning, you did learn Mandarin. Can I assume that you used it extensively while in Singapore?
No, so that's the thing. Like I was kind of looked at where would the Mandarin, because I had invested something like 5 years.
Gosh.
It's a fun language and stuff, but I had invested a lot of energy trying to learn it, and then I was like, well,
Hmm.
yeah, am I trying to get to a country that doesn't want me to get in? And so I was like, where can I use my Mandarin? And then I saw that Singapore does speak Mandarin, and anyway, I ended up here and ended up there, and then 6 months in, I had spoken Mandarin maybe twice to my hairdresser,
Yeah.
and because in Singapore you have like four official languages, English being the main one, and so everyone kind of like speaks English. So
Yeah.
and so like nobody sort of really speaks Chinese there. So at least like in my little bubble of environment when I was there as an intern. So yeah, I
Mm,
ended up sort of turning the page on Mandarin as well. And nowadays I wouldn't be able to really speak to you, but I still have
oh my
some
God.
artifacts from my time in
Look at
China.
that. There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Actually, my kids they took Mandarin as a foreign language for their first 5 years in school. So I picked up a little from them as well. Also looking forward to visiting at some point in the future. Let's jump into to some technical questions. So, Louis, we'd love to hear, we want to get into this section called data disasters, and we'd love to hear maybe of a really hard technical problem that you faced professionally and how you thought your way through the challenge.
So yeah, I think the one thing that was the hardest technical problem that I had to solve was this tagging system that I briefly mentioned at One Football. So back in 2019, the business was kind of growing, and we were going into new markets, and so we were connecting to more and more providers of football content, and so suddenly there was this influx of football blog posts that needed to be tagged with players, teams, and competitions so that they could flow directly in the app and be consumed by and recommended to users. And
Hmm.
imagine doing that, in 12 languages at scale. If you were to do that manually, or with a backend service that has like rules, based on keywords or something, you will only go so far, and your newsroom of journalists will be completely swamped and just will have to tag like continuously, like a lot of
That's
articles.
true.
So the
That's true.
mission was to kind of write this service that would be able to tag things. Yeah, like the really tricky part was that it was both like an R&D, like a lot of like AI or data products. It's a sort of iterative process, and it sometimes requires a lot of R&D. And the first version was not great, but like the first version had the merit of being shipped, and essentially also like to figure out how the backend of OneFootball, which was using a microservice architecture and everything, so on Kubernetes and things like that, how that backend would consume the data products. So like
Mm,
establish the kind of the schema, the contract between the data service and the backend service,
yes.
ship something on Kubernetes and everything. So kind of adopt the stack of the backend team. And then
Yes.
that something that was shipped was actually not great. So that was the V1. And then we started collecting like feedback from the journalists that were using it. And it was like, yeah, it was better than nothing, but it was not great. And so I had to go back and sort of rewrite, and it's not always that you have the time to actually do it. But unfortunately, like this was a really critical problem for the company. And so I went back, started from scratch again while the first version was still doing something and doing like
Mm,
helping somewhat. And then that's
hmm.
where I found new approach based on now my good friend Paco Nathan's work. He is someone like a very knowledgeable data scientist who's worked with many technologies, but most lately graphs and graph databases. He combined natural language processing with something called text graphs, where
Yes.
you can turn a document into its own little graph, and then you can run graph algorithms on it. And so you can do things like centrality and things like that. So when you apply that to a football article,
Hmm.
you end up, building a little graph and understanding what is at the center. And so if it's an article about PSG playing the Champions League, you might have the PSG entity that's super central to the article, and then Champions League, which is a little less central. And then, one of the players of PSG or
Hmm.
the coach of PSG, which are mentioned
Right.
there. And so thanks to that technique, we were able to really understand what the articles were about, tag them with the appropriate tags, and then recommend them to the right users. And so that was V2. And then we were able to ship that on top of the V1. And so that was definitely like the most complex things. And I would say that the lesson there for me is really to ship something, ship a V1 and like figure out,
Mm.
the data contracts, if you will, or like
Wow.
the, the way the data products will be plugged into the product so that then you
Right.
can build a better version.
Very, very interesting. And I appreciate the example as well to make this very tangible for us, Louis. I'm struck by how, particularly with your background, first as an engineer, you're still a practicing engineer. Now you are a data professional on top of that. As you are working with different clients, how do you deal with this challenge of communication with non-technical stakeholders?
Right. And I think that's a really tricky part. So I think that's something I'm working on like all the time, especially because the
Hmm.
field is moving so quick, right? So now you
Mm.
might have new topics that come up, and those new topics need to be broken down and explained and reasoned about. And
Hmm.
so there, I find the hardest part is really the lack of common language. And
Oh.
so you need to establish that language somehow, right? So you need to craft tools or frameworks, I think internally, and then share them with the audience, and then start to adopt them and sort of work them
Hmm.
into your vocabulary. So in practice, what I'm doing, like for example, for the analytics stack, is that I've been using for years now something that I call the data stack canvas.
Yes.
It's like this, it's inspired from the business canvas, like this sort of the startup business canvas. I forgot how it's called, but like the data stack canvas essentially has like a very kind of boxed in shape, and then it has all these different parts, and then for each part you have some questions, and then from the answers to the questions you pick the right tools, and then you connect the tools together, and just sort of the workshopping that canvas helps you like map out either one data pipeline or a company's full data stack. And then
Wow.
you can take that concept and then move it to like MLOps, for example. So there's MLOps canvas as well. And so for those fields where things are now a bit mature, like it's fine. But now when it gets fun is for fields like, LLM app development or GenAI app development now, whatever, things that are like constantly moving. How do you now build that canvas, and like which part do you
Hmm.
keep in, which part do you discard, and like, yeah, that's pretty tricky, I think. But that's something I guess that every data professional is facing, I guess.
I love the approach though, to trying to find that, create that common language using a data stack canvas. This is fascinating and is maybe not something that our software engineers and data professionals are learning in school.
Right. No, I think I've picked this up from more like from this entrepreneurial experiences that I've had, trying to more from the business side, trying to kind
Yes.
of map out things on even on slides, like I'm not sure if engineers or data peeps are learning how to communicate things on slides, but like just trying to, yeah, to be clear and not say too much as well. Like it's a constant struggle of mine, and so I find like kind of distilling that down into a tool that is reusable and that is transposable from one project to another or from a client to
Mm.
another. That's
Yeah. You've actually said, Louis, that there's a misconception about data engineers, basically that they don't necessarily need to know about the rest of the company. And you're saying that's false.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, I think, so of course it's hard to, kind of know everything, right? And we tend to kind of stay in our comfort zone sometimes, but like, I find that whether it's for communicating better with your stakeholders or for better understanding what you have to do, I find
Hmm.
that sort of going outside your domain is super helpful. And so that's true for data analysts having to learn what's going on the data engineering side, right? Or
Right.
vice versa, but also outside of the data team, trying to understand what the full stack web team is doing, right? And of course, I'm a bit biased because I told you I sort of stepped out of data and then came back, but it really struck me that a full stack web developer that's working in TypeScript all day has no clue about DBT, has no clue about data in
Mhm.
general. He knows like an OLTP in Postgres, right? But he might not know no lab database. He might not know Snowflake or whatever, right? And so he knows Postgres, but like, or she knows Postgres, but like she doesn't know Redshift. And then I'm like, it's
Mm.
interesting, right? It creates those silos. And then of
Yes.
course that's just for engineering. But then of course, if you go to business to marketing, it's even, the chiasm is even bigger. And so I think, yeah, as a data engineer, I think it's super important to sort of, once you've gotten your stack or your pipelines under your belt, try to
Hmm.
really expand and try to understand what your business is doing, how your pipelines are contributing to the business, and how to better explain what you're doing as well in that way.
Wow, wow. I feel like there's maybe a lot of pressure on professionals in general and specifically on data professionals because yes, there is a lot of benefit to having building domain knowledge. It's not something you just have. You build it through work experience and it takes a while to build that. But data professionals are sometimes often under timeline pressures. Either they're troubleshooting current problems and bugs or they need to deliver the next data product for the business. How have you handled stress or even burnout in your career?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely, and definitely a big topic. Because there's no shortage of things to learn and to do. And so, I'm actually not a good example as I did burn out myself, at the end of 2022, in that VP of engineering role. And I'm sharing that because I think, yeah, it's very common now. And whether you've been diagnosed properly or not, I think a lot of people are feeling this. And so it's important to talk about this. But yeah, I think for me, it came down to kind of while the rocket is sort of going,
Yes.
try to figure out what's causing the issue or what's causing the situation, and then try to analyze a little bit. So, is it the environment or is it maybe something with you? You like, for example, one of the hard one. Sort of learnings is that I need to like delegate early and often, things like that. So there are learnings that you can take for yourself,
Wow.
and then there are things that you can also learn about your environment. Maybe it is not set up correctly, and then yeah, like in my particular case, I just decided to kind of put myself above like the company that I was at, and then ended up quitting and focusing on my own projects. And I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I could do that. So it's not always possible, but like I would encourage everyone to sort of, yeah, if you feel like this sort of, wear and tear, let's say, it doesn't have
Yes.
to be this way, right? And
Yes.
it's something so common now. I'm sure
Ooh.
you hear about this, in the community.
Yes, yes. Wow, wow. Louis, man, I really appreciate you sharing this story. I know it's very personal. It's something that a lot of us have experienced, but don't talk about. And so, because people don't talk about it, when it happens to an individual, they sometimes feel like they're the only one going through this and they don't maybe get the help that they could get. I have gone through it. I went through burnout a couple of years ago and I was shocked, Louis. I've always been a very hard worker. I love the work that I do, which makes it easier to become a workaholic, right? And so in my case, I lost a job and it delivered such a blow to me. It took me like 9 months before I felt like myself again, and that was scary. So I appreciate you really sharing. I wonder, Louis, I would guess that maybe some of the things that you are doing outside of work are preventative in helping you from maybe not getting so close to burnout again. Maybe some of the sports things, for example.
Exactly. Yeah, you're totally right, right? So actually I've sort of over-indexed now on sports a little bit compared to before, because otherwise it's so easy to eat at your desk and shorten that lunch break, or like work 1 hour more and don't not
Yes,
go to the
yes,
gym,
yes,
and
yes.
And yeah, no, I think if you have like these other projects, whether it's sports or personal life or whatever else, and you start booking that time in the calendar, you will see that then it starts like conflicting with being a workaholic. So that might be the first sign that you need to work on that.
Yeah, yeah. That's tough. That's tough. But hopefully this is going to help someone to do some of the preventative things so they don't get so close to burnout. Let's talk about some happier times.
Yeah,
Louis,
right.
I need some happy stories from you. Louis, I know I like to ask this story about projects people are proud of. You talked about the NLP Tagger project, which is such a cool project. I'm wondering though, either with that project or with others that you've done, how are you measuring your impact on the business?
Right. So I think with data, but like, especially it's pretty hard sometimes to do that. Like sometimes front-end facing teams, like web teams, might have an easier time because they're shipping products or they're shipping a new
That's true.
release and things like that. And with
Yes.
data, I find that, yeah, it's good to look at things like the number of data products shipped, like some kind of
Mm,
an indication of adoption of data, but also velocity of the data team if you ship more and more products, but also the usage of data products, like how deep those data products are sort of embedded in the business. Sometimes the monetization of data products as well. So, seeing clients of mine who have who use Airflow to build a marketplace of data sets, and then they sell those data sets and they monetize the data sets. So there
wow.
suddenly the business impact of the data team becomes very tangible because you're
Mm,
actually making revenue. And then the harder piece is how to make a lot of data will make processes more efficient or will save time.
yes.
And
Yes.
so in those cases, I find it's maybe a bit harder to measure the impact, but it's definitely like a big part of now also like all the Gen AI talks, right? Like a lot of these products are automating a process. So if you take the case of the Tiger, the NLP Tiger that I mentioned,
Yes.
it's saving a lot of time from the newsroom. And so how do you measure that impact? It's hard to say, but like if it's not there, people complain. That's a good sign. If it's down for 2 weeks and nobody has said anything on Slack or whatever, it's
That's a
not a good sign.
problem. That's a problem. It's true. It's true, Louis. I've heard someone describe good data products or effective data products almost being like the water running out of your faucet or the electricity. We don't really notice that it's working well until it stops working, until it's
Right.
broken. And then we're like, who turned off the lights? Why isn't the water turning on?
That's right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, I find yeah, data is exactly like that, which makes it hard sometimes to sell to stakeholders. But like, yeah, if the adoption is there, you will know because people will ask
Yes.
questions or people will instantly like tag you if something is wrong.
Yes, yes. No, this is great. This is great. Louis, I was fascinated with your perspective on professional success. Everybody thinks about professional success, but in different ways. You have talked about it in terms of sustainable personal growth. Why that emphasis on sustainable?
Right. So we did talk about like the my story with burnout. So of course
Yes.
that's a component of that.
Mm,
But also, as I go, I'm now like somewhat like 10 years of experience, and there's still like so many things to learn, right? And it's
mm,
like, and it will never stop, I think. And so I find that whether it's within data analytics or within data engineering or within ML or I did step out of data as well. So I had to kind of dive into a completely different world. And so it's
mm,
like, if you don't um cap yourself or like limit for yourself like the amount of things you can look at, I think it's very hard to stay sustainable. Just in
wow.
my personal experience, it's not possible to kind of do it all. And nowadays with with YouTube, with all the shiny things, with blogging as well, with all the communities that we're part of, I think it's really easy to sort of dive into the latest things and like
Hmm.
go left and right. But it's like, yeah, like what I'm interested in, I think, is more is trying to be curious and like learn more and have more impact, but like at the same time do that for a long time, right?
Wow.
And I've mentioned my friend Paco Nathan, and he's been doing this for more than 30 years, and he's a great inspiration. It's like when I see him, he's still like leading the field and like pushing his own work
Interesting.
with such a you know enthusiasm that I wish I will have in 10, 20 years. And
Yes.
so I'm really thinking about it this way. And so yeah, that's what I meant with sustainable personal growth.
Yeah. That's actually pretty exciting when you put it that way. I love the example of Paco Nathan and how for 30 years he's been contributing to open source. He's still an expert in his field. It can be interesting. I've found that sometimes, because I've worked several jobs in my career, sometimes when I get into a job, I start working on projects. I'm going deep on those projects, but I'm going so deep that I'm not bringing my head up to look at the industry and see what trends are new, not learning new things. And it can be easy to go very deep on what your current company needs without growing yourself. That might be an
That's
element of
right.
sustainability. How much do you give to your current job versus making sure you're looking at the trends so that you are building toward the next job?
That's right. That's right. Something that I really like, which kind of touches a little bit on what you said, is the double diamond research process from products.
What's
It's more
that?
like a product and UX design thing. But if you
Okay.
take the same approach of like expanding your search space,
Hmm.
going wide and like looking at the market, looking at everything, and then narrowing it down for your particular need or for your context of that company or for your
Hmm.
context of this week, this month, this particular
Yes.
project might be different in 1 month, but first going broad and then sort of narrowing it down and then doing cycles of that. I find this is a great way to sort of navigate because
Oh, wow.
you somehow like time box the going wide. And
Yes.
so you don't like go wide forever and like just like
Ever.
get overwhelmed of like
Yeah.
everything that's coming at you.
That's good.
Let's let's go wide for maybe 2 weeks. Let's time box
Yes.
or like let's do teams do discovery sprints or so it might be a 1 day or 2 weeks or maybe a 1 month of sort of learning journey thing. And
Hmm.
then let me condense it into a capstone project or into a
Okay. Oh,
like a feature or something like this. And then after that, you can go
yes.
and like do it again, right? And this is more like even like a sort of research approach, if you will. But that's sort of what that's a way to keep it sustainable as well, because I know that
Yes.
if I open my mailbox of like all the newsletters and all the tools, I can be busy for like
That's too much. Oh, that's great. I love this approach of time boxing it, going wide for a limited amount of time, and then taking those learnings and putting them into a capstone project. That is phenomenal. Okay, I'm gonna have to adopt that. This is great. I've kept Louis for more time than I deserve, but let me see if I can wrap this up. Louis, I love to give our guests the opportunity to shout out a mentor or an influence who has been positive to them on their journey. You just mentioned Paco Nathan, wonderful example. Is there anybody else who has been a mentor or influence to you?
Stefan Dury as well is now working at DBT Labs. Actually, he was my manager at One
Wow.
Football, and so when I joined the data team at One Football, it was under Stefan, and we learned so many things together. And he taught me how
God.
to build a data team and how to be successful at rolling out all these new technologies. And so it's a really good example of engineering management or like data management, if you will, or engineering management. Yeah.
That is incredible. I had no idea. I will definitely have to make sure Stefan watches this interview. This is phenomenal. One last thing, and then we have to let Louis go. He's recovering from his half marathon yesterday. That still
That's right.
blows my mind. Louis, for people who are excited about your career path, some of the things that you're doing right now, are there words of advice you could give to them to help them build their own version of a sustainable but fulfilling career?
Right. So I touched on like learning the business. I think that's still like that would be my number one thing. If you work in data, try to sit close to your users, whether it's the marketing person or if you're a data engineer, maybe it's your data analyst. Try to learn from that oversight.
Hmm.
And then beyond that, I would say try to build data first and not like tool first or hype first. Look at the data you have before building the data product. Otherwise you will sort of, in my experience, build the wrong thing.
Wow.
The last maybe bit of advice would be that, yeah, I think now with the AI assistants, right? Like the technical floor is rising somewhat, right? And I'm
Yes.
sure like some of us are feeling maybe that pressure or that new way of things. And I would really encourage us to sort of look at this in a positive way and try to think of it in the way that we are now moving from building products or like, doing the sort of the dirty work to now building businesses and trying to kind of prove that ideas work and sort of go a bit higher level in terms
Right.
of what we're doing. And so let's try to focus on that narrative and like, learning the business will help there as well, because if you understand what the business is trying to do and how your data pipelines and your data work is contributing to that,
Yes.
then there's no reason to be alarmed, I think.
I love it. I love it. Folks, we've been talking to Louis Guitton, an engineering leader. He's working with chief data analytics officers, data and AI leaders, and he's helping them maximize their data investments. Congratulations on the Berlin Half Marathon. Love that you're still playing football. That is phenomenal. And we didn't even get to the fact that you were born on a volcano. I just feel like that's another
Yeah.
conversation. We're going to leave that as a cliffhanger. Episode 2.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me, Bolaji. That was phenomenal. Super cool format, and yeah, have a great rest of the week.
This was brilliant, Louis. Thank you again. This was a really, really interesting conversation. And thank you all for hanging out with us. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
This show is brought to you by DBT. DBT is the industry standard for data transformation. It allows your team to prepare data for analysis in a way that's centralized, modular, and entirely open, all inside your cloud data platform. The outcome? Consistently dependable analytics for your organization. Now, the DBT community was built for and by data pros. Come hang out and transform with 70,000 of the brightest analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists in the world. With DBT, you transform your data. With the DBT community, you transform your data career.